So my wife's name is Isabel. She and I are soulmates. We're just as much friends, right here. Let's go, Isabel. She and I are just as much friends as we are husband and wife, and that makes our marriage a lot of fun. We love to laugh. And I can remember my first big belly laugh with Isabel, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell about how we first started dating. Isabel's originally from Brazil, and I'm from here in the U.S., and I actually met Isabel in Brazil when I was on a year-long exchange program at her law school in São Paulo. At the time, I was studying Portuguese, which is the language of Brazil, and as a result, while I was living there, I had programmed my phone to be in both Portuguese and English, so that way I could easily toggle back and forth between both languages when I was, sending emails or text messages or trying to converse with people from both countries. And so, like I said, Isabel and I had just started dating, but it was getting to that point in the relationship when I said, you know what, gotta give her a little bit of a heads up that I think she's kind of cute, and maybe we should be a little bit more than friends. So we were wrapping up a little text conversation one night, and you're gonna laugh, it's the best I could come up with, but I said, I'm gonna text her XOXO at the end of this conversation. Yep, sweep her off her feet, right? And as soon as I typed in XOXO into the Portuguese keyboard and pressed send, it auto-corrected to xixi e cocô. The Brazilians know that that means piss and shits. Took her a while to respond to that one, as you can imagine. And she says, when she did, it was like, what is this sick American goodbye you have just given me? I still get cracked up about that one. And although that's a funny little story, I'm not here today to talk about comical cultural differences that exist between us. I'm here to talk about a much larger issue, cultural bias. And I speak about cultural bias from a unique perspective. As an American, married to someone who's not from the U.S., during a time and a week in which immigration in our country is both hotly contested and debated. And we've felt the pain of this debate. Why? Because despite the legal protection that's granted towards documented immigrants in our country, this legal system does nothing to protect them from the hate, discrimination, or dehumanization they experience on a daily basis in the U.S. I was blind to this for most of my life. I grew up in rural Midwestern suburbs that weren't all that diverse, and I had no real reason to actively participate in the immigration debate until I met my wife. But when I met Isabel and we were married and we moved together to the U.S., I was exposed to this deep-rooted societal issue that is cultural bias. And it's damaging. It's damaging to our nation's values, and it's damaging to our nation's immigrants. Now, I'll give you an example. It wasn't too long ago, Isabel and I moved from Georgia to Ohio, and when we did, we had to go to the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles, which I'll refer to as the BMV for this story. And we went simply to transfer our Georgia driver's licenses over to an Ohio license. And so we went together that day, we hopped in line. It's a nightmare as always, right? And you get up to the counter, and we started to present our documents to get the driver's license. The first piece of documentation we submitted was Isabel's temporary green card. And I use the word temporary actually very purposefully because the biggest myth in the unwritten book of immigrating to the U.S. is that you can simply marry an American and get a green card. It could not be further from the truth, folks. It takes at least 3 to 4 years, a big investigatory process, numerous interviews, hefty fees before you're even considered for the permanent green card. Isabel and I have been married for more than 3 years and still don't have one, so I think that proves the point, but I digress on that matter. So we started to present the documents, the first of which was her temporary green card, and the moment the BMV rep saw that green card, the reaction we got was shocking. She got up out of her chair, began to raise her voice, in a very quick and accusatory way, started demanding additional documents, including mine, which we hadn't yet presented. She looks at me and she said, "And where's your green card?" And I said, "I don't have one." And she said, "Well, then you can't get a driver's license." And she pushed back our documents. She leaned over the counter, pushed us out of the way, and waved on the next people to become attended to. And when she did that, I grabbed her arm, I put it down, I said, "Beg your pardon." I said, I know, I'm so nice, right? I beg your pardon. I said, "I don't have a green card because I'm a U.S. citizen." And when I said that, she stopped dead in her tracks, looked up at me a little bit confused, and this is all she could conjure up, and I'll do the action. "Well, why didn't you say so?" And all I kept thinking was, why does it even matter? You see, U.S. citizens can get driver's licenses. Legal permanent residents can get driver's licenses. Even foreigners with foreign driver's licenses can get a temporary international driving permit in the U.S. So what's it matter at all where you are from if you're in line at the DMV? And why were we being treated this way? The purpose of this story is to portray to you all that her tune changed entirely when she found out that I was an American. She was nicer, she was more accommodating, she was more patient. When she thought we were both foreigners, she had little to no patience at all to deal with us. And I imagine in that very moment, I was getting a small taste of what it might feel like to be discriminated against as an immigrant in this country. Now I was shocked at the way we were treated, and something kept bothering me about it all day. I kept asking myself, what would that experience have been like if I went alone to get my driver's license that day? What would that experience have been like if Isabel went alone to get her driver's license that day? I'll tell you exactly what would have happened. I would have been in, out with the license, no questions asked, and probably would have given a 5-star review to the BMV rep for customer service. Isabel, on the other hand, may not have walked out with the driver's license. Not because she wasn't legally entitled to it, she was. But because in the course of being treated that way, she may have been forced out. Or she may have determined it was, in her own best interest or for her own personal safety that she leave empty-handed. Now, I was a little bit naive to think that these things don't happen all that often. Now, I know they do, right? Just turn on the news. It wasn't too long ago, and a lot of you may even recall a horrifying clip that came out on social media. Made national news, and it was of 2 Latinas at a local retailer in a checkout line, speaking Spanish amongst themselves, and another woman came up right behind them, and out of nowhere begins to berate them, starts screaming and yelling expletives, telling them that they should speak English, that they were nobodies, and that they should go back to where they effing came from. What we must acknowledge is that these occurrences are not all that rare. They're happening on a daily basis in our cities, on our campuses, and in our workplaces. Sadly, I think Isabel has become conditioned to this type of treatment, and she's only lived here for 3 years. That's what tells me it's so grossly overt, and it's essentially become synonymous of what it means to even be American, to be culturally insensitive, and that's a problem. I'll tell you how I know that. When we left the BMV that day and hopped back into the car, I was hot. I was still so mad and upset with the way we were treated. I kept saying, I can't believe it. And Isabel was there on my right, and she was cool, calm, collected, as if she had been there 1,000,000 times before. She looked over at me and said, "Welcome to my world." It pained me to hear that, just as I hope it might be paining you to hear that right now. Even my family and I have made culturally insensitive comments towards Isabel, and we're talking about people who love my wife, who would do anything for her. That's how I know we're so blind to this bias. I'll be honest, I think my parents were probably a little bit skeptical when I told them I was, studying abroad and had fallen in love, that I wanted to marry her. But when I did tell them that, Isabel came to the U.S. to meet my parents, And when she met my dad grilled her with interview questions. The first of which was, "What are your intentions with my son?" Do you think that's a very natural first question to ask your future daughter-in-law? Do you think it would have crossed his mind, though, at all to ask that if she was from the U.S.? And now put yourself in Isabel's shoes. Isabel is an accomplished woman. She graduated from the top law schools in Brazil and the U.S. She's a practicing corporate attorney. She speaks 3 languages fluently. In fact, her English has been perfected in such a way that 99% of the people that meet her don't even know she's from anywhere but the U.S. You see this questioning, this cultural bias that's exhibited towards her, these culturally insensitive comments, they don't come from a place of concern about who Isabel is as a woman. Her values, her morals, her ethical framework. They come simply from a place of concern that she's not from here, to no fault of her own. When we exhibit cultural bias, we're operating on autopilot, making all of these assumptions, doing and saying things that are polarizing, insensitive, or make no sense at all. For those of you who are here today in the audience or will watch this talk on the internet, you are now in the know. You can no longer be ignorant or blind to the fact that this bias is both dividing and degrading. The immigration process already robs you of your dignity in many respects. How do I know? I'm reminded of it every time we cross the border together. We get big black X's in our entry forms. We have to stand in special lines and are subjected to questioning that wouldn't make you think that she's an attorney and I'm an accountant, but that she's a prostitute and I'm a pimp. It's exhausting to live that way. I've been a U.S. citizen my whole life, and she and I have been married, living in this country for over 3 years. We've taken multiple jobs, we've lived in 3 different states, bought and sold homes, we've adopted puppies, paid taxes, you name it, we've done it. We've given our all to this country, and not once has it in return told us that we can call it home together forever. Now, Isabel, she's in the audience today supporting me while I give this talk. And I know it's a topic that's near and dear to her, just as it is me. And as I thought about how to close the talk, something kept calling me to acknowledge her. And so I've prepared a few words for her that she'll hear for the first time today that I would love for you all to hear as well. Isabel, the hardest night of my married life was a night you were discriminated against. It happened in front of my own 2 eyes, by people we know, and I did nothing about it. You brought us both to tears that night, called me out on it, asked me why I didn't defend you, and I had no answer. I am and continue to be ashamed that I didn't. I'm sorry. I apologize for my bias, for every time this bias has been exhibited towards you, for the times I was blind to it. But these words are also a call to action for me and for others, that we acknowledge our bias and that we act against it, that we treat and value you for who you are and not where you are from. Isabel, to you and every good, hardworking immigrant of this nation, you are not visitors. You are not aliens. You are strong and courageous, forgiving and optimistic. You continually persevere in the face of adversity when it would be all too easy to quit. Don't give up when something makes you question it all. The smile you wear during these times is not a lie. It's a beacon of hope and a reminder to us all that this nation was also built by brave and resilient immigrants like you. And that is most certainly an ideal worth spreading once again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.